Hello, Real Vision. This is Sebastian Moonjava, and today we have Rekt Capital, a cryptocurrency trader, analyst, author of Rekt Capital newsletter. How you doing, Rekt?
I'm doing great, Sebastian. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's start off with hearing a little bit about how you got into the cryptocurrency space and what you've been doing since then.
Absolutely. So 4.5 years ago, I got into the space. First started out with Bitcoin, as is usually the case when you enter crypto. It's kind of the entry cryptocurrency that you start to think about. And then I started to learn more about altcoins and how these altcoins are different in some way to Bitcoin. And that started getting me questioning, why are there altcoins? Is Bitcoin somehow inferior? Why do you need another Bitcoin? And then that's, down the rabbit hole. I started learning about altcoins, and as we experienced the 2017 bull cycle, I started to think about cycles. Why do we see price go up and then price goes down for many, many months at a time? Which is why I started researching into the space, first about Bitcoin price cycles, the market cycles, and then altcoins, whether they're altcoin hype cycles, whether they have macro trends in of themselves. And that's kind of how my kind of claim to fame, where I started talking about different types of research in a very in-depth manner and just unbiased, because I just really wanted to answer these questions for myself, looking at the charts in an unbiased way and trying to understand what they are saying. So I never impose any bias on these charts, whether that's bearish or bullish. I always try to say it how I see it. So it's always about being level-headed and just providing these cutting-edge insights in an easily digestible format.
Yeah, were you there? Were you involved in cryptocurrency through that cycle, the 2017, 2018? Were you involved with that? And was that your first like big cycle or big, bull market in crypto?
Yeah, so in the beginning, I was just holding Bitcoin, but I was part of that cycle. And as the cycle progressed, I started to learn more and more about altcoins. So I was definitely an active participant there. And this is my second bull market. And given how many years have passed, it's a totally different ball game from my experience, but also through the lens of what we're actually seeing on a macro scale as well.
Yeah. So what do you tend to focus on for your newsletter at Rekt Capital News? Are you focused on technical analysis? Are you more focused on purely the cycles or psychology, or what do you tend to go over with your newsletter?
So the Rekt Capital newsletter, it's rektcapital.substack.com, where it's a celebration of this sort of content. Any kinds of research questions that I have or my followers have for me, I always try to address them. So, for instance, one of the pieces I did was about the Bitcoin 4-year cycle, which is an extensive analysis which really simplifies the Bitcoin market cycle into a few years. So I look at the 4-year cycle through the lens of year one, year two, year three, and year four, and then the 4-year cycle repeats itself. So the 4-year cycle is one of those pieces that I've written for the newsletter, but I also focus on a wide variety of topics, whether I'm comparing alt seasons, this alt season, this potential alt season, comparing that to previous alt seasons and how they compare, but also how does crypto money flow between altcoins, Bitcoin? Do we tend to see cyclicality in how these altcoins tend to rise and then deplete in their valuation? So it's a wide variety of different market phenomena that I try to explore in the newsletter. And it's been such a great resource for these cutting edge, unbiased, level headed insights.
And so we had talked about this kind of cyclical nature of these things. You said, you believe that there's these 4-year cycles, and you think that that's going to continue. And maybe where do you think we are now in this cycle?
So that's a fantastic question, Sebastian. So let's focus first on the chart from March 3rd, 2020, when I first started talking about the 4-year cycle on Twitter. Here you have essentially two 4-year cycles. Each cycle has 4 candles, and each candle is a 12-month candle. So essentially a year. And the way we should look at these cycles is candle number 1 is the most exponential candle of them all. This is where we see the most impressive, explosive growth in Bitcoin's price action, where we see historic new all-time highs. And following from that year, we see a bear market, which is candle number 2. And candle number 2 tends to retrace, on average, 84.5% in every cycle. And it's funny because many people get quite excited about Bitcoin's price action that, well, we're so bullish now that we probably won't see a 80% correction, because how can we? I mean, Tesla, all these things are happening at the same time, the halving. But the sentiment was very similar in 2017, where we saw, historic all-time highs of $20,000 at the time. And yet in that candle 2 that followed 2017, we saw an 84.5% correction, which is the average across time. So we tend to see these corrections, but going back to the candles in of themselves, candle number 3 is the bottoming out candle, where we try to hammer out a base and just establish that bottom before reversing into a recovery candle, candle number 4. And candle number 4 is one of the more important ones, because there are 2 simple horizontal lines here. And these horizontal lines are essentially the 4-year cycle resistances. So the first horizontal line is 13,900 or 14,000. And this resistance has plagued Bitcoin for a few years now, for 3 years. And you can see how in the previous 4-year cycle, so from 2017 to 2020, you can see 13,900 was rejecting Bitcoin in candle 1, candle 2, and even candle 3. But only in candle 4, we saw an eclipse of that resistance. And if we just cycle to the very first 4-year cycle, that candle 4, you can see how candle 4 is eclipsing $741. So it's eclipsing the resistance, the 3-year resistance essentially, of candle 1, 2, and 3 in that 4-year cycle. And it's essentially showing us that candle 4 is closing above that resistance, turning it effectively into a support. And the sellers in that region are no longer existent, pretty much. So if we just move on to, unless you have a question, Sebastian.
An interesting question I had recently about these things, like you're saying, that there's either resistance or there's support. Can you kind of maybe explain how we get that? Is that because there's tremendous volume there and that creates this support? Can you explain to me, like, what's the phenomena of these? Why does it create resistances? Why does it create support? What is actually, what's the idea behind that?
That's a phenomenal question, because one of the things I'm truly passionate about in these price charts is the human psychology that governs them. Whenever we look at a price chart, it's a historical script of human emotion, fear and greed. When price goes down, we start to see extreme fear. And when price reverses towards the upside, we start to progress into extremely greedy territory. And the thing about these 4-year cycles, yes, they are cyclical, but that's because human emotion, human psychology is cyclical. If we were to be in a cinema today and God forbid, it's a burning cinema, we start to see smoke and there's fire engulfing the front chairs, everybody's going to run and rush towards the exit, all in a crowd, all at once. But that's actually going to impede our survival in that moment, because it would be better to form an orderly queue, and that would get us out faster. But we don't think logically in the heat of the moment, and we just rush to the exit, and it's actually not a good idea. And we tend to behave similarly, all of us, in similar circumstances. So in a burning cinema, all of us would rush to the exit, and there's nothing inherently bad about that response. It's just the way that we are wired. But we have that response during a time where Bitcoin is crashing, for instance. We experience the adrenaline, we experience the fear, and it's a fight or flight response, akin to the fight or flight response we'd experience if we're about to get hit by an incoming car, or if we spot a lion in the desert, for instance. So These are very interesting things to know about price and human emotion. And because we react similarly in similar contexts, the same thing goes for price. And that's why it's quite cyclical. So to go to your question, resistances are essentially points of sell-side pressure. And for whatever reason, people think it's a good idea to take profit there. But the way I think about technical price action and these sort of resistances and supports is that many other people have that idea as well. And in part, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy where people see resistance on the chart. They see that here it tends to sell, and maybe I should sell here as well. But in large part, I think it's the cyclicality of that psychology, because we have to remember not many people are technical analysts. Not many people actually look at the charts. And a common question I get on my Twitter is, well, because you have this 4-year cycle, it's not going to happen because everybody knows about it. But the thing about that is, how many people actually own Bitcoin? I mean, I think it's less than 1%. Maybe it's even higher than that at this point. The global population is 7 to 8 billion people, somewhere in that ballpark, and only 1% actually owns Bitcoin. So from that 1%, an even smaller percent is actually on crypto Twitter.
Yeah.
0.2%, 0.3%. So we're at the forefront of these cutting edge insights, and we represent a very small population. So because we know about these 4-year cycles, most people who own Bitcoin but aren't on crypto Twitter, most people trade emotionally, so they won't be viewing charts. So not only do they not know about the 4-year cycle, but the people that are yet to come into Bitcoin and buy Bitcoin, who are the remaining global population, they also don't know about the 4-year cycle. So it's that sort of that's the sort of perspective there.
Hey, if you like this clip, be sure to like and subscribe for more crypto related content. Also, be sure to check out the full interview and more only on realvision.com/crypto.